Good morning, everyone. I am Dan Peterson, and welcome to this session entitled Athlete Cognition, Exploring the Perception and Decision-Making of Playmakers. Very happy to be here at the Sports Biometric Conference. I'm also very happy to be here today with Dr. Peter Fadde. Good morning, Dr. Peter.
Hello, good day.
First of all, I am not an academic. I have no PhD initials after my name. I am a sports dad. I've been a project manager in the technology world for 25 years. Currently work for a neuroscience technology company as a project manager. So my interest here is really, I've had a fascination for years and years with the brain. And as our three sons, my wife and I have three sons, and as they were growing up, I was a lot like Will Ferrell here in Kicking and Screaming. I was the volunteer soccer coach, baseball coach, hockey coach, basketball coach, you name it. But I loved doing it because I loved watching my sons learn sports and watching them grow through the years from toddlers to grade school to high school, and a couple of them played in college. And I was always fascinated with how they do what they do on the field, how they make decisions, how they manage the chaos in especially in team sports, and how they are able to grow with that and really become masters at a lot of those skills. But one of the things that after doing this for a number of years, I thought, it would be interesting if I could try to write a book about it. And so went through that whole process of learning what that means to do that. And one of the things I knew, if I were going to put a book out on this, I would need a very strong co-author and one that is academic expert, well-respected in his field. And lo and behold, I found one. As you may see around this conference these next 2 days, Len's name and his fingerprints are all over this conference. He helped organize all the speakers. He's been working tirelessly on putting this together for us. And you'll see him in another session where he's talking about one of his other favorite topics, biofeedback. That book came out in 2018, a lot of good reception to it, but one of the questions that keep coming back to us from parents and coaches is this decision-making black box in the middle. We talked about the perception. I'll go into that a little bit. The perception angle, what they see and hear and touch on the field or on the ice or on the court. There's the technical aspect of learning skills and performing skills. But in the middle, there was this muddle of decision-making. We took an input, we created an output, but what happened in the middle here? And, if you have kids playing sports or you've watched your favorite team, you see mental mistakes happen and you're frustrated by that. And how could he make that mistake? At the same time, a lot of clutch plays, and amazing that he saw that receiver down the field in that double coverage. So that's what we wanted to focus on. And what we heard back from the coaches and parents was, could you focus on your next book on the middle, on that decision making? And so lo and behold, we came out with this book in November, The Playmaker's Decisions, and that's what we did. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what is a playmaker? And why did we use that term? Well, when we were doing the first book, we interviewed a bunch of people, and we interviewed 2 out of the 3 on this screen, but we asked Sidney Crosby, what is a playmaker? And you can see his response here. We asked Brad Stevens, head coach of the Boston Celtics, and you can see his response here. I won't read them to you. One person we weren't able to interview, but we would love to, is Pep Guardiola, head coach of Manchester City. He's been the head coach of Barcelona and others. He made a comment. This is a quote from another article on his playmaker on his team, Kevin De Bruyne. And one of the things he said is he makes the right decision in the right moment every single time. And I thought that was a really succinct way to say it. Now, of course, it's tough to do that every single time, but it's something that you strive for. And it's that player you see on the field that really is making a difference. They have a different vision of the field. They see things that others don't, and they make those quick, accurate decisions. We'll talk more about those. One of the fun collaborations we had with the first book was with Mike Sullivan, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, two-time Stanley Cup champions. And quick story, in Len's 40 years at Boston University, he taught a lot of students. One of those students was Mike Sullivan, who played for Boston University in his college playing days. He took some of Len's classes. They got to be friends, and over the years, they've stayed in touch. And one of the interesting things is when Len and I were getting together to start this first book, I found a video clip on YouTube, and you can still go out and find it as well. And it was Mike Sullivan probably 5, 6, 7 years ago at a coaching conference. And he was talking to, I don't know, 150, 200 hockey coaches. And he got up there for 45, 50 minutes and talked about the brain. When I was playing college in the late 80s, as we talked about at Boston U, the new frontier was physical fitness and training. That's when players started to get into the weight room, work on strength and conditioning, developing power in the neuromuscular system. That was cutting edge back then when he was in college. Now we have a pretty good understanding of how to train athletes physiologically. The next frontier is how to get players to understand anticipation skills, recognition skills, and decision-making, how to deal with high-stakes environments, how to handle pressure. And in my generation, there's always been an assumption around the rinks that hockey sense is something that you're just born with. You either have it or you don't, but you can't teach it. The reality is that hockey sense or sports sense is not unlike learning how to skate or learning how to stick handle. This new capability is, as he plugged the book, the playmaker's advantage. And so we were really happy to hear that. And we've heard from a lot of coaches who feel the same way. They're looking for this type of information so that they can use it. And we were very fortunate to interview one of the legends in the industry, Dr. Anders Ericsson, and very sad to hear of his very untimely passing. And we miss him, and we were lucky to be able to talk to him. But as you all know, he's the one who did a lot of research in deliberate practice. And Malcolm Gladwell made some of his research famous with his Outliers book. And it was Malcolm who coined the phrase 10,000 hours, not necessarily Dr. Ericsson. That was just one of the results from his research. But one of the things that the takeaways from that is so many parents and coaches hear 10,000 hours, and my child has to practice for 10,000 hours and then he'll be a LeBron James. Not necessarily, but what the point that Dr. Ericsson was trying to make to us and to everyone was the point about how to practice, how to use deliberate practice methodologies and techniques to really get at correcting specific things in your play. And when we talked to him a couple years ago, he wasn't that encouraged, as you can see from this quote. Is he saying, I've seen a lot of practices, I've visited a lot of teams, I'm not quite seeing the individualized training context that we need to see and to capture what he calls deliberate practice. So one of the things that terms, and there's a lot of different terms out there. We landed on this one, athlete cognition, because we wanted to try to, as I said, try to start this new vocabulary with parents and coaches. It's a very simple model here of search, decide, execute. There's a lot of different variations out there, certainly in a lot of different academic papers, but that's how we focused on just kind of breaking these things up. And that's how we did this in the first book. And obviously decide was in the middle, and that was kind of left in that black hole. And then when we moved on to the next one, we said, well, let's break down that decision-making into another model. Again, there's lots of models out there. You can pick one. We liked this blend of different things. And let me just go over this real quickly. So on the bottom half, attention, cognition, and emotion, we focused on those as a group and called them traits. These are things that athletes bring to the table. They're internal to them. And some of those things can be trained. Some of those things you're born with. It's a mixture, but they all affect the success and the quality of your decisions, especially in a sporting context. So obviously attention has to do with perception, taking in information from the environment through the senses, a lot of research done there, et cetera. Cognition is more about working memory capacity, information processing speed. How fast can you use all of that flood of incoming information to process it, to remember it, and then to come up with a decision? On the top half, we break those down into what we call constraints. Constraints are external factors that affect decision making, things that are maybe out of the control directly of an athlete. And a couple of the ones that we didn't see a lot of in the literature, but I think they're ripe for more research to come up. One of them is rules of the game. Somewhere along the line, young players are taught the rules of the game. They may take those in implicitly by watching the game, by playing with their friends on the playground. They start to learn the rules. And then when they get into more organized sport, they get into games, they start to have those little nuances. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And there is some emerging research on how athletes process that, how they process the rules subconsciously, but they're overlaid. Those are the rules aspect that a player has to incorporate when they're out in the field and make those decisions, or at least it influences their decisions. Tactics, that's what the coach, sets up, the game plan. They practice it all week. Here's how we're going to play this game. Here's how we're going to attack them, how we're going to defend against them. And those tactics have to be brought in by the individual athletes and the players, and they have to factor those in as they go out in the field and play this game. Oh, that's right. The coach said we're not supposed to move the ball up the field this way. We're supposed to move it up that way. Oh, that's right. I learned in the film session that this player has these tendencies, and now I have to factor that into my decisions and my movements. So that tactical information also has to overlay onto a decision. And then obviously the toughest one is time. Everyone can make a pretty good decision if they have plenty of time. Buying a new car, picking a new job, whatever. You have a lot of time to think about it and make the right decision. When you have half a second with the ball at your feet or the ball in your hand, and you have to make a split-second decision, or you see a pitch coming at you and you have, as Peter will describe, maybe a quarter of a second to decide what you're going to do, that has to be automatic. That has to be quick. You have to understand what you need to be looking at and how you're going to set that up. So the time of a game clock, 30-second clock, a 24-second clock, time is running out, or just the time pressure of an opponent on top of you in a second, and you need to decide what you're going to do, make a move, pass, shoot, whatever. That also puts a big constraint on the type of decisions that you can make. Let me wrap up my part of this with talking about, I was talking to Len about this. He's like, well, if you have a talk about decision making and you don't mention Kahneman and Klein, they're going to throw you out of the room. But these two guys played big parts in, unfortunately, we weren't able to talk to Dr. Kahneman, but we were able to talk to Dr. Klein, and they're linked in a lot of ways. They've both come up with decision-making theories that have gone a long way to help people understand how people make decisions. And it was interesting, in a, what year was that? They actually wrote a paper together because a lot of people thought they had conflicting viewpoints and theories about decision-making. Dr. Kahneman and his longtime research partner, Amos Tversky, they focused on more kind of what happens when decisions go wrong, heuristics and biases, and how those play into our decision-making. Dr. Klein, on the other hand, focused on not decision-making in a lab and trying to identify those, but his claim to fame is going out into the real world and seeing how experts in the real world make decisions in context in their environments. He studied firefighters, he studied first responders, he studied military. And from observing them in the wild, making decisions and interviewing them and talking to them about how they make those decisions, from that, he came up with some of his theories of recognition, prime decision making, et cetera. And so the two of them were always out there over a couple decades with these, what some thought were competing theories. And then to the point where they actually got together in 2009 and they wrote an article together in the American Psychologist. And they started to settle some of these viewpoints about, heuristics and biases versus what can be really done and how an expert actually makes decisions. One of the things that I took away from both of them is Dr. Klein's theory of typically in a time-constrained environment, an expert athlete, an expert firefighter, whatever, is going to have a theory of take the first option. So they're going to look at through all of the thousands and thousands of patterns that they've observed in their career, that they've learned about. I've seen this situation so many times before in a little bit different context, a little bit different game situation, a little bit different opponent, but I've been here and I've done this before. That his theory is the brain will call on those patterns and do pattern recognition and will come up with the best first option and will be able to make that decision and quickly kind of process, that's the first option I have. Do I think that's going to go okay? Yeah, I think so. Let's go with it. And that's how they learn over this repetition over and over. And that kind of falls into what Dr. Erickson was talking about with deliberate practice. You're trying to repeat those patterns over and over again so that your brain can generalize and say, I've seen this before and I can make a quick decision. And that's where experienced players in research studies always show those quicker and better decisions than novices, et cetera. But that's a lot of theory. And we wanted to jump into a lot more applications of the theory and technical aspects of the theory. And that's where Peter shines. He's been doing that for a long time and develop products and develop research. And so that's where we're going to flip over to Peter and he'll take it from there.
A lot of what we're talking about is out of the psychology realm. And obviously Len's out of the psychology realm, the sports psychology realm. And there's this area that's actually, as an academic discipline, under sports psychology, which is called sports expertise. It's the sports expertise area. And it goes with the cognitive psychology. It goes with the expertise research. It goes with Erickson, Anders Erickson. So and the root of that is chess research. So when we're talking about sports expertise of this particular domain, we're not talking about how well you hit or kick the ball. We're talking about this decision-making aspect. That's what they're talking about. It's the same as talking about chess. What I'm trying to do is position this notion of what we're calling sports expertise, which is the perception and decision-making, not the what you do, but the what you see. And that is a distinct area that has its own methods. It's under sports psychology. But this is where it's so important and valuable to be talking at this conference. I spoke at the first SportsBiometrics conference. I think it was 2016. Because, and Len will, go along with this, although it's under sports psychology academically, the practicing sports psychologist doesn't much venture into that area because they're going to be very careful not to step across that line into the coaching realm. Their mental skills, but they're going to avoid any kind of technical skills with that. And so that leaves this extremely rich area and the methods used in it and the findings and everything. We're talking about 40 or 50 years of good science in here for exactly this exotic recognition, decision-making we're trying to get at, that's just sitting there, that's rotting on the vine. Who's going to pick that and make it part of the day in, day out, which is where you make the differences.
Right.
Day in, day out preparation of athletes. And my belief is that it's the people at this conference, that it's this, it is the biometrics people. It's the people that their shingle is, it doesn't necessarily says mental skills. It says something more like, like skilled performance, you know, a sports performance specialist. They can be biomechanists. They may have encountered some of this. So this is not something foreign out there. This is something that is sitting there for you to add to your kit. So there's the why, you know, what's in it for me? Why are we watching this? This is because you can do something with the organizations you work with, whether those are youth or professional, that can accelerate the development of this particular skill set that is recognized and always has been. You know, who has a footy brain? Australian rules football. I saw that headline in the airport in Sydney. You know, we recognize when people have it, and it's just, well, it's just left to experience or intuition or magic or birth or something. But these are skills. And so that's what we're going to just take a real quick peek here at, is how do we actually get that set of skills? And I want the folks at this conference to really be thinking about, hey, how does this fit into my toolkit? We're really looking at these perceptual, cognitive, the ones that are in parentheses are still ones that are internally paced, but the others are externally paced. You're reacting to something happening in the world, which makes it harder to train. You can go out there and train your serve until your hand bleeds. How are you going to return? How are you going to practice return of serve in the same way? These are harder things to. This is why it sometimes just gets left to open play. And yet this is where we're looking really to see where we have these opportunities to develop deliberate practice approaches, and a lot of them with the use of technology now. But as Adam and Kevin said in the first session on tech and non-tech for training perception and cognition in soccer, you know, you don't need technology to do that. But we're going to focus a little bit more on tools that can be used with technology. So on the kind of open end of that, we've got something like soccer, basketball, hockey, defense, defending in soccer, basketball, or hockey. That there's a lot of athleticism involved in there. We can still see, you know, a biomechanist getting in there and trying to work on quick reactions and the hip turns that a defensive back in American football needs to do, and some things like that, and rebounding and positioning, and you know, so those are kind of athleticism. Then we get to something like batting, hitting in baseball, softball, or cricket, and to some extent the return of serve in tennis within that. And that's this purely reactive thing. If you break down the skills, nobody should be able to do it. It is beyond human cognitive and physical ability to hit a well-pitched baseball. It's all workarounds, which is good news, because those workarounds then offer things that can be trained. That's where we get into the perceptual cognitive skills. By perceptual cognitive skills, we mean things that are coming in through the eyes. It's, you know, it's perception, but it's through the brain. It's not a vision thing. It's not a hardware thing. It's a software thing. So here's a batter's view of a pitcher, a pitcher known for his particularly wicked slider. So coming out of hand, this pitch is going to look like it's going to clump you right in the head, but it does something quite different. It's a different kind of movement to it. So what we're talking about with a perceptual cognitive skill is, can you see that ball coming out of the hand, but apprehend enough about it to know that it's going to end up right down there in the hitting zone by your knee? Or is your brain going to mentally bail out, get out of the way of this pitch right here that's coming right for your head? So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. And this is the way they did it in the lab. This is my lab from about 2020. This is the video occlusion method, that is cut off. Here we've got a ball player. He's guessing pitches right with the video cut off, right at coming out of hand, the most difficult occlusion situation.
A curve split.
See, now he got his first split finger there. So you could see him, you know, mentally shook up, and he gets out and he gets right back into it.
Good.
Now I'm giving feedback, which you wouldn't do in a research context, because this is actually a training study. And it was a pretty effective one. It had an actual measurable effect, and this was a controlled study with a treatment group, a control group with a college baseball team. And this then really brought us out into saying, okay, we've got something here that can help us identify what that skill is. As we were saying, Dan, the first thing is, okay, we've got to first just accept that this is a real skill. This is not magic. This is a learned skill. So we did that, and it actually predicted some of the key metrics that you would expect. And these were with minor league professional ball players: on base percentage and reverse for strikeouts, because you want that lower. So that's pretty indicative of that. The value of that is now we can make a test for it. That was research. This is a test that hundreds of minor leaguers have taken in order to try to measure that skill. So we know that somebody, a college player, may be playing minor league, or lower level college baseball. They've got hitting statistics, but we don't know how good their opponents were. So they can give this to them and say, how good is just this perceptual part? This doesn't mean they can hit. It means they can tell that that ball coming out of the hand is going to be that hittable one at the knee. And so, now you get some pretty useful information to coaches, and you can see where this can fit into a battery of tests that a lot of the folks at this conference might be overseeing, giving to athletes in a spring training situation we're now in baseball, hopefully without any disruptions this year. And so that becomes part of a screening, part of a perceptual cognitive screening, but not general skills, very specific to the skill of batting. And then we can transport that to training as well. So here we're taking that same video occlusion method with the cutoff videos, and we've made a training tool out of it. So this is a video occlusion training tool. You pick your pitcher. Here you've got a right-handed batter's point of view, and you're going to see the pitch cut off, and you guess what type of pitch it is, fastball, whether it's a ball or a strike, and you get a replay so that you see the full length of the pitch. So it's like that first one we're seeing. You got to guess with this, but then you're going to see the longer one, and you're trying to put that together in mind. And now we're training. We're not testing this, so you're getting immediate feedback. The green and red here is they get immediate feedback, and especially if you get one wrong, you get the replay to see what it was that you missed. In this case, it was a cutter. Fastball would go to one direction, but you can see that the ball cuts it. So you needed to pick that up from there.
And Peter, this is available today?
Yeah, Dan, that's an available thing, and it's a big step, because, like I say, the technology for that has existed. The video occlusion approach has existed for 40 years.
Right.
The technology is Twitter simple. Get some video, cut it off, guess what's going to happen? And it simply has never, ever been reduced to a usable tool for coaches, either for measuring that skill as we did, or for training it as we're showing now.
And you're expanding that beyond baseball and softball pitch recognition, right? Into tennis and other areas?
Yes. Here.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. Let me, yeah, Dan. So this is the classic return of serve in tennis. We're just coming off of the Australian Open, right? And so a lot of this was developed in Australia in the 70s and the 80s. And so here we see that same method. Serve is cut off. We're just having them guess whether it's wide to the body or to the tee, and then getting the replay. Trying to train the eyes to read the bend of the knee, the attack angle of the racket. You get some points, and you get some things like that kind of give you a little reward. So this is a drill and practice methodology. So that fits well within Dr. Erickson's model of deliberate practice. It's drill and practice. And people sometimes wonder if people out there wondering, well, am I doing deliberate practice? If it fits within the concept of a drill, it probably is deliberate practice.
So, Peter, this is one of those uses of technology that, an athlete would love to practice his sport, maybe 8 hours a day, but physically they can't. And so this is leveraging technology to continue the cognitive training. But while they sit on their couch and they're physically recovering from a day of workouts, but they can still get additional reps, as you say, of the training using the technology.
Exactly. And that's what we're looking for, is the automaticity.
Mhm.
You know, it's if you ask me what's 7 times 6 and I say 42, did I get it
Right,
right?
right,
And the answer is no, I didn't get it right, because we don't want that to be a calculation. We want it to
right,
be an association. 7 times
right.
6 is 42. How do you know? I don't know. Don't ask me again. Which is pretty much what you're going to get from the extra, from the professional ball player who hits that slider for a home run, comes back to the dugout, and somebody says, "Well, how did you get that one?" "Well, I knew it was a
Right,
slider." "How did you know?" "I don't know, and don't ask
right.
me again."
It's
Like you said
Kahneman's
with Kobe
system one.
Bryant, that's the last
Yeah.
thing that they want. It's the system one, system two thing also
Mhm.
from Kahneman. You know, you
Yep.
don't want to leave, you don't want to be entered into system two. The last thing the person who's doing that wants to do is think about how they're doing it.
Right.
So the trick for the coaches, and I think our sports performance specialists at the conference have a role in this, is to how do you do that crossover? How do you practice in system two?
Mhm.
Very deliberate, very targeted, and perform in system one.
Mhm.
Very intuitive, very rapid, very unconscious.
Mhm.
Figure that
What's
one
your
out.
thought? Yeah. What's your thoughts? For a lot of our, we spent a little bit time in the second book on this. We're growing up with developing athletes who are digital nomads. They've known nothing but the digital world, and they love their video games. And in that realm, video games, virtual reality, etc., where has the sports training market arrived? Do you feel that there's occlusion as you're doing with those things? But where are we at with virtual reality and gaming and those kind of things as a way to train for actual sports?
All right, Dan. So it's interesting to bring up virtual reality, because that is in people's minds. So this is a virtual reality cave. This actually goes back a couple of years. You'd be standing in there life size, but just like virtual reality and other types of things, that ends up not being something that actually works that well. But what is gaining a lot of ground now, especially in higher level baseball, but also for youth, is virtual reality, where you're putting it in the headset. And so here we see this is actually a major league hitting coach at a conference. You can see what he's seeing. And so because you've got the virtual reality, you can put the information over it. You've got all these controls. You can control the view. There's a lot of things that you can do with that. On the other hand, what you don't get is that photorealistic depiction of, did you see the skinny wrist? Did you see the karate chop of the pitcher coming over with the ball, where you're trying to read those cues? So this is not a better or a worse. If you're trying to put all the skills together, you're probably better off with this. If you've got something where somebody's either training separately those hitting skills, or they're already advanced and they have them, then you're trying to top it off with these recognition skills. What we've kind of been looking at the perceptual cognitive, those ballistically reactive skills. We also have kind of the decision making, the patterns of play type
Mhm.
of ones that we've talked about. And this is something where this is virtual reality now, but this is 360-degree video. So
Mhm.
this is real video shot with a video camera, but viewed inside a uh, head-mounted display, viewed
Right.
inside the goggles. And so when you move, it's not like the TV and it moves with you. When you move, your head moves and you see differently in the scene. The scene is
Mhm.
right there, and you can look up and down in that. It's not
Right.
true virtual reality, because what you see on the screen actually is video. It's not a computer generated graphic
Mhm.
of that. So this is a combination. So let's see what this looks like. There's just a few moments of it. Okay, but that's actual in the game, in match action. So you have to
Right.
think, where was the camera? Now you're seeing the camera in a practice situation. And this is from Len and some work he's doing with people. So this isn't a practice situation. We're seeing what that player sees in their eyepiece.
Mhm.
And so this could be valuable to a coach because he's saying, okay, oh, right there, Dan, you can see why your passes get intercepted. When
Right.
you know, when you've got the stick on the puck, your eyes are on the puck. Your eyes shouldn't be on the puck. Your eyes should be down the ice.
Hmm.
I can see that because I'm seeing through your eyes, where, to the extent that we're seeing what you're seeing within that. So again, very useful tools. And sometimes you get arguments about real versus feel,
Hmm.
because especially expert athletes, and this goes back to your quote about age group specific things, but they'll report that they do something that video analysis shows they don't do. In baseball, a lot of the pros will say, um, A-Rod will report that he swings down at the ball. In his mind, he swings down at the ball, and that keeps his mechanics together somehow. But he
Hmm.
doesn't actually swing. I mean, he starts there, but then the swing comes up. And so they go back and forth. It's a Twitter thing, real versus
Right.
feel. The
Right.
thing is, if you can take the technology and put that on a feedback loop, the thing where we're trying to recognize the pitches, it's immediate feedback.
Mhm.
That's why it's the same drill and practice method you'd learn foreign language vocabulary or multiplication tables with.
Mhm.
We're trying for that association. So you're getting that feedback loop. And now, just as humans and other animals can learn pretty incredible tricks through repetition, feedback,
Mhm.
progressive difficulty. All of a sudden, you find yourself being able to do these impossible things. And we're just
Mhm.
trying to introduce that element of deliberate practice rather than leaving it to happenstance or just raw experience,
Mhm.
to make that deliberate to accelerate those kind of skills. And when we think about it that way, I think that we find it more falling within the comfortable toolkit
Mhm.
of the performance specialist.
When Peter, when you talk to a lot of baseball coaches you've talked to, um, and you introduce this technology, maybe they've seen it, maybe they haven't, et cetera. What would you say are some of their concerns, questions that you hear over and over about um, how do I incorporate this with the real game of baseball? What's the objections that you hear, and how can coaches who are looking at this for the first time, maybe in our audience, say, well, maybe I should take another look at that now?
There are several of those that can hit like that. One of them is that, like, when we put the pictures on the on the app that does that, the Game Sense app for the
Mhm.
pitch recognition, the coach will look and say, "Wow, that's really fantastic. I would really be into that if they have if they would be looking at the picture they're going to face tonight."
Ah, yeah.
And what this reveals, and it's what people here can help coaches understand, is that there's a very substantial difference between skill acquisition and performance support.
Mhm.
When you're in that skill acquisition stage, and until you're in the major leagues, you are in the skill acquisition stage, you do not want the person you're facing. You want to be building up this skill that then you have to transfer to the novel situation.
Mhm.
We're not trying to prepare you to succeed tonight. We're trying to make you better.
So yeah, and trying to take that to other sports or team sports, et cetera, just as Tom Brady has seen thousands and thousands of different play sequences, both live and on film. It's that generalization, that automaticity, where he's seen all of these things before, maybe not that specific scenario that's in front of him on game day, but his working memory and his pattern recognition is such that in an instant he can see what's about to happen. And some may call it intuition, some may call it some kind of magic, but it's really that practiced repetition, just like in hitting a different kinds of pitches, that where they've got to the point where I know exactly what that is with just a smidge of information.
And it's not because they've seen that exact one, but they've seen
Right.
other ones, and you kind of generalize what you see. And so
Sure.
all of those instances start to get generalized into kind of a rule. So
Hmm.
it's kind of inductive rather than deductive. You're building those up to where you've got a mental rule of what a slider does. Okay. All right, Dan. So here's where we started from, at least on this segment, with this array of sports skills out there, which involves some kind of perception and decision making. And I think for the skill acquisition specialist, the performance specialist, find things in there that you're comfortable bringing an approach to that says here's a deliberate practice, while being cognizant not to cross over into coaching, right? That's not what we're there for, is
Mhm.
not to coaching. But if we can take some of these perceptual skills and treat them as basic skills to be built up, almost with visual weightlifting, then we can make a contribution. We can add to our toolkit, we can add to our value, and we can accelerate the development of players, and thereby the return on investment of our organizations.
Mhm.
All right, so that I guess that's our dog and pony portion, and we stand by for questions. Is that the play here, Dan?
That sounds great. Yeah, and uh, we're available live. I understand you can write in questions, and we're happy to answer those as best we can. So thank you for your attention, everyone. Appreciate you joining our session here. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll talk to you soon.